Have you ever heard of an American emperor? Not in the pages of official history books, but on the dusty streets of a booming city where an eccentric man reigned over the hearts of thousands. Today, I take you back in time to a vibrant and wild 19th century San Francisco to tell you the incredible, almost magical story of Joshua Norton, a man who had neither a throne nor an army yet was an undisputed ruler, whose kingdom was not made of lands, but of pure collective fantasy. Prepare to discover how an entire city chose to believe in the impossible, transforming a simple individual into an eternal legend. In the turbulent year of 1859, as America wrestled with hopes and contradictions in that melting pot of dreams and gold dust that was San Francisco, a man named Joshua Abraham Norton made an extraordinary decision. Tired of the injustices and absurdities of the world, in an act of eccentric genius, he proclaimed himself Norton the Emperor of the United States. It was not a passing prank nor a desperate cry of madness. It was the beginning of one of the most extraordinary, touching, and poetic stories America has ever known. For 20 years, this legend would permeate every street corner, every cafe, every heart of San Francisco, transforming a failed businessman into a universally beloved monarch. A monarch without a kingdom, but with a loyal people. Imagine the streets of San Francisco in the mid 19th century, dust rising underfoot, carriages clanging by, sailors disembarking, gold prospectors bustling about, the incessant buzz of a city that never sleeps, expanding at dizzying speed. And in the midst of it all, a figure emerges, unmistakable and majestic in its singularity. It was Emperor Norton. You would never have mistaken him for anyone else. His bearing was regal, though his uniform wasn't exactly what you'd expect from a monarch. He almost always wore a top hat, yes, but not a brand new one. It was often worn, sometimes a little crooked, but he wore it with the dignity of a crown. His military uniform, often dark blue, was also somewhat worn by time and use, a testament to his endless inspections around the city. At his side invariably hung a sword, more decorative than functional, the visible symbol of his self proclaimed power. And often, following him, one could see his two faithful dogs, Bummer and Lazarus, two strays who, just like their master, had found a special place in the city's social hierarchy. Norton was not a man who hid. He walked the dusty streets with an almost ceremonial regularity, inspecting streets and sidewalks, parks and buildings, as if he were a general inspecting his troops or a sovereign watching over his kingdom. But his gaze was not one of severe judgment, but rather of affectionate surveillance. Its presence in this way became an essential element of the urban landscape, an integral part of the fabric of San Francisco. So much so that it became an authentic symbol of the city, almost like the Golden Gate Bridge would be a century later. People knew who he was, recognized him from afar, and often greeted him with a bow or a respectful nod, a spontaneous gesture that went far beyond simple courtesy. He was their emperor, a beacon of humanity and extravagance in an age of accelerating economic and social fervor, an oasis of eccentricity in a world that seemed to be going mad for gold and progress. And so, with his unmistakable presence, Emperor Norton did not simply parade. He considered himself a true sovereign, with all the duties and responsibilities that entailed. And what better way to exercise power than through decrees, edicts, and proclamations? With the seriousness of a true statesman, Norton regularly issued sovereign decrees which were printed and published in local newspapers, much to the amusement and curiosity of the population. His proclamations ranged from the most complex affairs of state to the most everyday issues, always with a touch of extravagance that made them unique. Consider this. In 1872, Emperor Norton, with his far-sighted vision, decreed the construction of a bridge across San Francisco Bay, connecting the city to Oakland. At the time, the idea was considered pure madness, a pipe dream, the product of an eccentric mind. Yet, 70 years later, the Bay Bridge was actually built, almost exactly where Norton had envisioned it. Was it a coincidence, or was his madness in reality a form of visionary genius? Another example of his decrees shows his more playful side and his aversion to formalities and social divisions. At one point, Emperor Norton proclaimed the abolition of all citizens' clubs and political associations in the city. The reason? In his opinion, they were fueling divisions and discord, and a good empire, his empire, needed to be united. His decrees were obviously not enforced in the legal sense of the word, but they were greeted with a mixture of affection and hilarity. The newspapers published them, people talked about them at the bar. His presence, his statements were a constant invitation to lightheartedness, irony, and not to take life or oneself too seriously. In an age of rapid growth, speculation, and social tension, Emperor Norton was a bastion of eccentricity, a reminder that life could be lived outside rigid conventions. It was an oasis of originality in an otherwise stifling context, a symbol of individual freedom in an age of intense conformity. But Joshua Norton's story wouldn't be so extraordinary without the most incredible element of all, the reaction of the people of San Francisco. It is no exaggeration to say that the attitude of the citizens towards their emperor was something unique in history. Instead of ignoring him, mocking him disrespectfully, or confining him to an institution, the people of San Francisco chose to play along, to embrace this fantastical parallel reality and make it their own. It was an unspoken conspiracy of affection, a collective act of kindness and respect that created a unique and deeply moving relationship between a man and his city. Norton wasn't begging, he wasn't a beggar, he was the emperor, and as such he expected the treatment due a sovereign, and San Francisco gave it to him. The most fashionable restaurants and bars, the ones frequented by high society, offered him free meals. Not as charity, but as an honor to their sovereign, it was customary to see him seated at a table, eating with dignity, sometimes imparting blessings to the managers or customers. The same thing happened in the theaters. The best seats, the central ones with the best view, were always reserved for him. Emperor Norton was a regular at the shows, and his presence was a seal of approval, a completely natural element for the audience who greeted him with respect. But perhaps the most striking example of this incredible acceptance was his coinage. Norton, as emperor, believed he had the right to mint his own currency, and so he issued self produced banknotes, printed with his portrait and signature, with denominations ranging from a few cents to several dollars. What anywhere else would have been considered a scam or a delusion, in San Francisco became a form of special currency. Shopkeepers and merchants, large and small, accepted these notes as actual payment. Of course, they had no legal value, but they had an emotional value, a symbolic value that went far beyond money. Holding an Emperor Norton note was like owning a piece of history, a unique souvenir of San Francisco's singular identity. And in many cases, shopkeepers kept these notes in their cash registers not to spend them, but as a good luck charm or as a testimony to their participation in this magnificent fiction. This incredible story isn't just a curious anecdote. It's a powerful demonstration of the human capacity to embrace individuality, diversity, even the most extreme eccentricity. San Francisco, at that moment in history, chose to see beauty in the unusual, dignity in the unlikely. In a society that often tends to marginalize those who don't fit into the mold, the city recognized in Norton not just a man, but a living symbol of what it meant to be free. A man who had found his own truth, however bizarre, and lived it with integrity. Emperor Norton's acceptance was not an act of charity, but a recognition of his unique role, almost a collective art performance in which all citizens were actors and spectators. It was a celebration of tolerance, humor, and a community's ability to create a sense of belonging for even its most unusual members. Norton, without knowing it or wanting it, became the mirror in which San Francisco saw its most authentic soul reflected, rebellious, open, full of life, and surprisingly human. His eccentricity became the norm, and his presence enriched the social fabric of the city in a way that no politician or tycoon ever could. His was a monarchy without oppression, a kingdom without territorial borders based only on affection and imagination. And so, for 20 years, Joshua Norton reigned over the streets of San Francisco, an emperor without a crown, but with a loyal people. His story reminds us that true authority does not always lie in power or wealth, but sometimes in the heart and imagination of a community. His life was a living poem, a tale of uniqueness and acceptance, a beacon that still shines today on the human capacity to find the divine in the eccentric and the value in the unusual. On January 8, 1880, Emperor Norton, while on the road on one of his usual inspections, suddenly collapsed and died. The news spread like wildfire throughout the city. San Francisco had lost its ruler, but his death wasn't a sad, solitary event. It was a national event for the city, a moment of collective mourning and profound respect. Thousands of people from all walks of life flocked to his funeral. Businessmen, workers, artists, sailors, they all came together to pay their last respects to the man who had given their city a touch of magic. People donated money to ensure he had a dignified burial, a rosewood casket, and a grave in Woodlawn Cemetery. His funeral procession was one of the largest ever seen in San Francisco, a tangible testimony to the love and respect the city had for its emperor. His story, a perfect balance between madness and genius, between dream and reality, continues to inspire and fascinate. Joshua Norton's story is a powerful reminder humanity is capable of extraordinary gestures of acceptance and caring. It teaches us that sometimes the deepest truth is found not in the most ironclad logic, but in the magnificent extravagance of fiction. If this story of uniqueness and community has captivated you, don't miss our next video.